The aroma of roasted chicken and thyme usually filled Eleanor with a comforting warmth, a sense of home and family. But this particular Sunday, as she sat at the polished mahogany table, the scent felt heavy, suffocating even. At 66, Eleanor had perfected the art of hosting Sunday dinner, a ritual she'd upheld for over 4 decades. Across from her sat Arthur, her husband of 44 years, his eyes a little too distant tonight. To his right, their son Daniel fidgeted with his napkin, avoiding her gaze. And beside Daniel, Serena, his wife, Eleanor's daughter-in-law, wore a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, a smile Eleanor had come to recognize as a precursor to trouble. The clinking of cutlery was the only sound for a long moment after Arthur cleared his throat, pushing his half-eaten plate away. "Eleanor," he began, his voice devoid of its usual inflection, almost mechanical. "From now on, you sleep in the garage." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, slicing through the carefully constructed veneer of familial harmony. Eleanor's fork, laden with a piece of chicken, stopped mid-air, a tiny glob of gravy threatening to drip onto her pristine tablecloth. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum where pleasantries and polite conversation had just been. Her heart gave a peculiar lurch, not of shock, but of something deeper, more profound. Daniel, bless his heart, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze darting between his parents, a faint flush creeping up his neck. His discomfort, however, was in stark contrast to Serena. Her lips, painted a careful crimson, stretched wider, a slow, triumphant smirk blooming on her face. Her eyes, usually watchful, now held an unmistakable glint of victory. It was then, in that moment of collective breath-holding, that Eleanor didn't feel the outrage, the fury, or the heartbreak one might expect. Instead, she felt clarity, pure, crystal-clear understanding. The pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even realized she was trying to solve suddenly clicked into place. All the whispers, the hushed conversations, the subtle shifts in atmosphere over the past months, they all coalesced into this blunt, brutal declaration. With a calm that surprised even herself, Eleanor slowly lowered her fork, placing it carefully beside her plate. She met Arthur's gaze, then Daniel's, then Serena's. "Okay," she said, her voice steady, barely above a whisper, yet resonating with an unyielding conviction. The single word had an astonishing effect. Arthur, who had braced himself for an explosion, for tears, for a bitter argument, blinked. His jaw, which had been set in a rigid line, slackened slightly. "That's it?" he demanded, a flicker of genuine confusion crossing his face. "Just okay?" Serena, ever the opportunist, seized the moment. Her voice, usually so saccharine, now dripped with an artificial sweetness that Eleanor found truly nauseating. "It's really not so bad, Arthur, darling," she purred, turning to him, her hand gently touching his arm. She then directed her gaze back at Eleanor, her smile condescending. "The garage is practically a studio apartment, Mom. It has a key, a small heater, even some shelving for your things. And the bathroom in the mudroom is just a few steps away. You'll have all the privacy you ever wanted." Daniel, seemingly relieved by Serena's intervention, quickly chimed in. "Yeah, Mom, you always said you liked having your own space. Remember that time you wanted to convert the attic?" He laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that grated on Eleanor's ears. It was a desperate attempt to rationalize, to normalize, to escape the crushing weight of his parents' fractured reality. Eleanor simply rose from the table. She began to collect the dishes, the gentle clink of china a counterpoint to the buzzing in her ears. Arthur watched her, his brow furrowed, still clearly thrown by her lack of resistance. Serena, meanwhile, launched into a lengthy, detailed explanation about financial restructuring and streamlining household expenses, her words like a dull hammer against Eleanor's skull. Eleanor tuned her out, her mind already elsewhere. The betrayal, sharp and undeniable, had ignited a different kind of fire within her, a cold, quiet resolve. Later that evening, as the celebratory laughter and clinking of glasses drifted from the main house, a victory celebration, no doubt, Eleanor packed a small canvas bag. She chose only essentials, a change of clothes, her toothbrush, a cherished paperback. She didn't bother with the sentimental items. They felt like anchors now, weighing her down to a past that was clearly gone. Each item she placed in the bag was a step away from her old life, a step towards something new, something undefined. Her thoughts drifted back over the last 6 months, a timeline of insidious, creeping suspicion. The sudden hushed phone calls Arthur would take in the garden shed, the way Serena would lower her voice to a conspiratorial whisper whenever Eleanor entered the room, the cryptic changes in passwords on shared family accounts. It all made sense now. They hadn't been preparing to surprise her with a trip, as she had naively hoped. They had been preparing to erase her. A particularly vivid memory surfaced, making her skin crawl. It was a few weeks ago, during one of Serena's overly affectionate displays towards Arthur. "Oh, Daddy," Serena had cooed, pressing a kiss to Arthur's cheek as he presented her with a new expensive watch. "You always know just what I want." Eleanor had been standing right there in the living room, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands, watching the scene unfold. Arthur hadn't corrected Serena, had simply chuckled, patting her hand. The casual intimacy, the possessive endearment, had sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine then. Now it was just another confirmation. Lying on the narrow cot in the garage, the unfamiliar chill seeping into her bones despite the small heater, Eleanor pulled out her secret. From a hidden pocket sewn into the lining of her old, worn handbag, she extracted a small, prepaid burner phone. Its screen glowed dimly in the darkness, a beacon of her quiet rebellion. With practiced fingers, she navigated to her contacts, scrolling down to a memorized number. Evelyn Cho, the attorney she had discreetly consulted 3 months prior, acting on a gut feeling she couldn't quite explain then. Now, with the clarity of a newly broken dawn, she knew Evelyn Cho was ready. And so was Eleanor. The metallic scent of the garage hung heavy in the air when Eleanor awoke, the thin cot doing little to cushion her 66-year-old bones. Yet, despite the discomfort, her mind felt remarkably clear, sharper than it had in months. The realization that had dawned on her last night solidified into an unshakable conviction. They had no idea what was coming, she thought, a quiet, almost dangerous resolve hardening within her. She rose, dressed in the modest clothes she'd packed, and walked towards the main house, a silent observer in what had once been unequivocally her domain. Every step she took revealed Serena's pervasive influence. The living room, once filled with Eleanor's collection of antique ceramics and warm, inviting textiles, now sported stark, minimalist furniture and abstract art. The scent of Serena's expensive, cloying perfume lingered in the air, replacing the subtle fragrances of Eleanor's baking and fresh flowers. The home felt alien, a stage set for someone else's life, not hers. Arthur was already at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, staring blankly at the newspaper. For a fleeting moment, as his eyes met hers, Eleanor caught a glimpse of something she hadn't seen in him in a long time. Guilt. It was quickly masked by a carefully constructed indifference, but it was there, a brief crack in his hardened facade. "Good morning," Eleanor said, her voice even, betraying none of the turmoil within her. She moved to the coffee maker, pouring herself a cup. Arthur cleared his throat, pushing the newspaper aside. "Eleanor, about today. We have some people coming." Eleanor sipped her coffee, feigning a casual interest. "Oh, who might that be?" "Lawyers," Arthur stated, his voice tight. "Victoria Sterling and her associate. They'll be here at 10 a.m. sharp." He avoided her gaze, focusing intensely on the rim of his coffee cup. "It's about financial arrangements, property transfers, you know." Eleanor felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach, but her expression remained serene. This was it then, the final act of their betrayal, the confirmation of her darkest suspicions. "Financial arrangements? Property transfers?" she repeated, her voice laced with an innocent curiosity that she knew would disarm him. "Should I have my own lawyer present, do you think?" The question, so calmly delivered, clearly startled Arthur. He visibly flinched, his head snapping up. His eyes widened slightly, a flash of panic replacing the carefully cultivated indifference. "What? No, why would you need that?" he stammered, recovering quickly. "It's all very straightforward, Eleanor. Just a few papers to sign. Routine stuff. Victoria Sterling is a family friend, a colleague of Daniel's. She's completely trustworthy." He even managed a weak smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "No need to complicate things. It's for everyone's benefit, really." Eleanor simply nodded, taking another slow sip of her coffee, allowing her silence to speak volumes. Arthur, seemingly reassured by her apparent compliance, rose from the table, muttering something about a phone call, and retreated to his study. The moment the study door clicked shut, Eleanor moved with swift, silent purpose. She retrieved her secret phone from her pocket and immediately dialed Evelyn Cho's office. The receptionist, recognizing her name, put her through instantly. "Eleanor, good morning. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon." Evelyn's calm, professional voice greeted her. "Good morning, Evelyn. Things have escalated rapidly." Eleanor recounted Arthur's ultimatum from the previous night, the casual banishment to the garage, the celebratory laughter, and then the bombshell of the impending meeting with lawyers at 10 a.m. to discuss financial arrangements and property transfers. Her voice remained steady, despite the tremor in her hands. Evelyn listened, her silence punctuated by a sharp intake of breath. When Eleanor finished, Evelyn's tone had shifted dramatically. It was no longer calm, it was urgent, laced with a palpable concern. "Eleanor, listen to me very carefully. Do not sign anything today. You sign absolutely nothing until I have reviewed every single document. Do you understand?" "I understand," Eleanor affirmed, the urgency in Evelyn's voice mirroring the dread in her own heart. "I had a feeling this was coming." The whispers, the late-night calls, Arthur and Serena going through old files. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but— "Your instincts were right, Eleanor," Evelyn interjected, her voice firm. "What you're describing sounds like a coordinated effort to isolate you financially and legally. This isn't a routine financial arrangement. This is about getting you to sign away your rights to everything you own, everything you've built over decades, your home, your assets, your financial independence." Eleanor felt as if she'd been struck a physical blow. The air rushed out of her lungs. She looked up, her gaze falling on a framed family photograph on the kitchen counter, a relic from happier times, depicting a smiling Arthur, a beaming Daniel, and a younger, more innocent Eleanor. The image mocked her, a stark reminder of her own naivete, her unwavering trust in a man who was now systematically dismantling her life. The pain was sharp, an agony of betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. "What should I do?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely a whisper, the last vestiges of her composure threatening to crack. "You play along," Evelyn instructed, her voice calm once more, but with an underlying steel. "Be the confused, compliant wife they expect. Listen carefully. Take mental notes of everything they say, every document they present. Ask questions that seem naive, but you sign absolutely nothing. Tell them you need time to review, that you don't understand the legal jargon, that you're overwhelmed, whatever it takes to postpone signing. Can you do that, Eleanor?" Eleanor took a deep breath, pushing down the rising tide of emotion. "Yes," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "Yes, I can." She ended the call, the receiver feeling heavy in her hand. For the next hour and a half, Eleanor moved through the familiar spaces of her home like a ghost, preparing herself. She reflected on decades of trust, of unwavering loyalty, of shared dreams and sacrifices, all of it mistaken for weakness. They thought her an easy mark, a pliable wife who would simply fade away. But they were gravely mistaken. The compliant wife was gone. In her place stood a woman who, though heartbroken, was now armed with clarity and a quiet, burning resolve. At precisely 9:30 a.m., a sleek black sedan, polished to a mirror sheen, glided to a stop in front of Eleanor's house. Two women emerged, sharp and professional, perfectly tailored in power suits. Victoria Sterling, with her severe bob and an air of unyielding authority, led the way, followed by her younger associate, Charlotte Reed, who carried a slim, expensive-looking briefcase. They exuded a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from navigating the cutthroat world of law with ruthless efficiency. As if on cue, Arthur's car pulled into the driveway just moments later, parking hastily behind the sedan. He got out, smoothing down his jacket, a forced smile on his face, looking, Eleanor thought, as if he'd been waiting around the corner, ready to make a coordinated entrance. The synchronicity of their arrival down to the minute was yet another subtle confirmation of their meticulously planned strategy. Eleanor opened the front door, greeting them with her best, most unassuming smile. It was the smile of a woman who baked cookies for charity, tended a vibrant rose garden, and offered comforting advice over tea. Harmless, insignificant, she coached herself, allowing her eyes to appear a little wider, a touch more bewildered than usual. She extended a hand to Victoria Sterling. "You must be Victoria. Arthur mentioned you were coming. Do come in." Her voice was soft, welcoming, entirely devoid of the steel she felt growing within her. Victoria Sterling's sharp eyes, the color of slate, swept over Eleanor in a quick, dismissive assessment. Eleanor could practically see the lawyer mentally ticking boxes, compliant, perhaps a little frail, easily manipulated. The expected impression of a pushover, delivered perfectly. "Good. Thank you, Mrs. Vance," Victoria replied, her voice crisp, though a hint of a patronizing smile played on her lips. "And this is my associate, Ms. Reed." Charlotte Reed offered a brief, professional nod. "Please, call me Eleanor," she insisted, leading them into the house. "Can I get you some coffee or tea?" "Coffee would be lovely, Eleanor, thank you," Victoria said, already heading towards the dining room, her briefcase clutched in her hand, Charlotte following close behind. Eleanor busied herself in the kitchen, the rhythmic grind of the coffee beans a counterpoint to the hushed voices drifting from the dining room. She overheard the rustle of papers, the quiet clinking of pens, the low murmur of instructions. They were setting up their war room, she realized, right in the heart of her home. As she waited for the coffee to brew, Eleanor caught her reflection in the darkened window above the sink. The woman staring back was not the timid, slightly bewildered persona she presented. Her eyes, usually soft with warmth, were now alert, calculating, absorbing every detail, planning every move. This was not the face of a victim, but of someone ready to counterattack. The subtle shift surprised even her. Carrying a tray laden with coffee, cream, and sugar, Eleanor walked into the dining room. Victoria Sterling was already seated at the head of the table, Arthur by her side. It was Eleanor's usual spot, the place where she always presided over family dinners, directed conversations, and oversaw the comfort of her guests. Seeing Victoria there, so comfortably ensconced, as if she already owned the place, sent a fresh wave of ice through Eleanor. Victoria looked up as Eleanor entered, a thin smile on her face. With a dismissive flick of her hand, she gestured toward the chair at the far end of the table, the one usually reserved for a younger guest or someone momentarily relegated to the periphery. It was a clear, unspoken command, a deliberate placement designed to strip Eleanor of her power, to relegate her to a position of least power. Eleanor, her movements slow and deliberate, set the coffee tray down, then walked to the indicated chair. She sat quietly, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression carefully neutral. On the surface, she appeared compliant, meek, ready to accept whatever they presented. But inside, her mind raced. She was already 3 steps ahead, planning her counterattack, cataloging every slight, every condescending remark. Victoria Sterling began, her voice dripping with an almost saccharine false kindness, a tone Eleanor recognized from years of dealing with manipulative people. "Eleanor, thank you for being so understanding. Arthur and Daniel, and of course Serena, have been very concerned about your well-being. We've all been discussing what's best for you in the long term, to ensure your comfort and security." She paused, allowing the words to sink in. "These arrangements are truly for your own protection." Arthur sat beside Victoria, his face a mask of concern, though Eleanor could see the flicker of impatience in his eyes and a faint, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of his mouth that betrayed a deeper, unacknowledged guilt. He avoided her gaze, focusing intently on the pen in his hand. Victoria continued, her voice softening just a fraction, making it all the more patronizing. "As we get older, Eleanor, financial management can become quite overwhelming. Can it? The complexities, the paperwork. It can be a lot to handle, especially for women who haven't historically been as involved in these matters." Her implication was clear. Eleanor was an aging woman, presumably incapable of handling her own affairs. Eleanor offered a soft, almost imperceptible nod. "I suppose that's true," she murmured, her voice meek, playing her part perfectly. "It can be rather a lot." Charlotte Reed, who had remained silent until now, efficiently spread several large documents across the table. Her movements were precise, practiced. "We've drafted a simplified arrangement, Eleanor," she explained, her tone purely businesslike, devoid of Victoria's false pleasantries. She pointed to a section of the first document. "Under this agreement, Arthur will assume full responsibility for all financial matters, allowing you to live a worry-free life without the burden of managing investments, bills, or property taxes." Eleanor's gaze swept over the complex legal jargon, her eyes pausing at a specific clause. Charlotte continued, "In return, you will receive a comfortable monthly allowance. We've set it at $800 per month, which should more than cover your personal expenses. $800 for a lifetime of shared assets, of building a home, a family, a legacy. $800. The insult was breathtaking, a slap in the face that resonated with the force of a thunderclap. But Eleanor's face remained placid, betraying none of the seismic shift occurring within her. The figure of $800 per month echoed in Eleanor's mind, a paltry sum that wouldn't even cover her average grocery bill, let alone her small indulgences like a new book or a visit to the local botanical gardens. It was an insult, a deliberate act of financial strangulation designed to render her utterly dependent. Yet she maintained her gentle smile, as if genuinely grateful for their supposed generosity. That's very kind," Eleanor murmured, her voice soft, her eyes wide with what she hoped appeared to be innocent gratitude. "Thank you." She paused, allowing a moment for her gratitude to register. Then, with a hesitant, almost childlike curiosity, she asked, "And what about the house?" Victoria Sterling's smile sharpened, a predatory glint in her slate-colored eyes. This was the part, Eleanor realized, where the real clause came out. "The house, Eleanor," Victoria began, her voice carefully modulated, "will be transferred into a trust. Arthur, as the primary trustee, will ensure its proper management and maintenance. This safeguards the property for the future, for Daniel and Serena, you understand." It was a thinly veiled theft, cloaked in legal jargon, a deliberate maneuver to strip her of her greatest asset, her home, under the guise of prudent estate planning. Eleanor maintained her worried wife tone, a practiced fragility that had served her well over the decades in navigating Arthur's more volatile moods. "A trust, I see. And what about when he passes away?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if the thought of his mortality was too tender to utter aloud. Charlotte Reed, ever efficient, responded smoothly, her voice devoid of emotion. "The trust is meticulously designed to provide for your care in an appropriate facility should the need arise. It ensures continuity of support, Eleanor, so you'll never have to worry." The words, delivered with such clinical precision, struck Eleanor like an ice pick to the heart. An appropriate facility, a nursing home. They weren't just taking her home. They were planning to commit her, to institutionalize her. The thought sent a cold shiver down her spine. Then came the pièce de résistance, the linchpin of their entire scheme. Charlotte pushed forward another document, distinct from the property transfers and financial agreements. "And finally, Eleanor, this is a very important document for your peace of mind." She indicated a section with her pen. "It's a power of attorney designation. This grants Arthur the authority to make medical and financial decisions on your behalf, should you become incapacitated." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about control, absolute and complete. With this document, Arthur could essentially declare her incompetent, strip her of all autonomy, and make every decision about her life, health, and finances. They could put her away, out of sight, out of mind, with no legal recourse. "What kind of incapacitation?" Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible, though her mind was screaming. She forced herself to maintain the facade of a confused, slightly overwhelmed woman. Arthur, seizing his cue, leaned forward, his face a mask of concern that bordered on grotesque. His hand reached across the table, covering hers. His touch, once a comfort, now felt like a viper. "Well, honey, you've been so forgetful lately, haven't you?" he began, his voice dripping with false empathy. getting confused about simple things, losing your keys, misplacing your glasses, and sometimes you repeat yourself. It's natural as we age, of course, but we just want to make sure you are protected. Victoria Sterling nodded gravely, lending her legal gravitas to Arthur's insidious claims. Arthur is absolutely right, Eleanor. The important thing from a legal standpoint is that everything is in place to protect you when these issues inevitably worsen. We're being proactive for your benefit. Eleanor stared at the documents, then at Arthur's feigned sympathy, then at Victoria's unblinking gaze. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with horrifying precision. They weren't just planning for her decline, they were planning to cause it, to isolate her, to erode her sanity, to declare her incompetent, and then to erase me completely. The thought was a cold, bitter pill, one she forced herself to swallow without flinching. She took a slow, deliberate breath, her eyes sweeping over the faces of her husband, the lawyers. The time had come to break character, just slightly. I need to think about this, she said slowly, her voice still soft but with a subtle new firmness. It's a lot to take in. Arthur's mask slipped. A flicker of genuine anger flashed in his eyes, betraying his impatience. He leaned back in his chair, his voice suddenly sharp, devoid of its earlier pretense. Eleanor, we've explained everything. It's all very straightforward. There's nothing to think about. We just need your signature. Eleanor met his gaze, and for the first time in the entire dreadful meeting, she let a little steel show in her voice. It was barely perceptible, a tiny crack in the compliant facade, but it was there. No, Arthur, I need to think about it. 24 hours. I need 24 hours to review these documents properly. Victoria Sterling, ever perceptive, seemed to reassess Eleanor in that moment. The slightly bewildered wife was showing a spark of unexpected resistance. The lawyer's lips thinned. Of course, Eleanor, she said, her voice now cool, businesslike. We understand that this is a significant undertaking. 24 hours. We'll be in touch tomorrow morning to finalize everything. There was a veiled threat in her tone, an unspoken expectation of compliance. Eleanor merely nodded, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. They thought she was delaying the inevitable. They had no idea she was buying time for her own counterstrike. If you're finding Eleanor's story as shocking as I am, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to hear how she fights back. Your support means the world, Michelle, and I'd love to know where you're watching from in the comments below. The moment the sleek black sedan pulled out of the driveway, taking Victoria Sterling and Charlotte Reed with it, the carefully constructed calm in the house shattered. Arthur, his face a thundercloud, cornered Eleanor in the kitchen before she could even put away the coffee cups. What the hell was that about? He snarled, his voice low and dangerous, a stark contrast to the saccharine concern he'd displayed just moments earlier. His eyes, usually placid, now burned with an uncharacteristic fury. Eleanor turned from the counter, meeting his gaze evenly. Her voice was remarkably steady, though a tremor ran through her hands. What was what about, Arthur? My asking for 24 hours to think about signing away my rights to everything I own? Is that what embarrassed you? He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that grated on her ears. Embarrassed me? Don't be ridiculous, Glenda. You haven't contributed anything to this marriage in years. You just existed. A pretty ornament, perhaps, but certainly not a partner. The cruelty of his words struck her with the force of a physical blow. 43 years of shared life, of building a home, raising a son, of countless sacrifices made without a second thought, reduced to mere existence. It meant nothing to him, absolutely nothing. Arthur took a step closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Let me be very clear, Glenda. You have no income of your own, no assets in your name, no one who would take you in if I decided I'd had enough. You are entirely dependent on me. Don't forget that. Eleanor stared at him, the pain sharp and suffocating, but she refused to let it show. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. I understand perfectly, Arthur, she replied, her voice soft but with an underlying current of defiance. Her refusal to capitulate, to crumble under his threats, made his expression harden even further. Good, he snapped, his patience clearly at an end. because tomorrow morning, you're going to sign those papers. All of them. And there will be no more thinking about it. Understood? He turned abruptly and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Eleanor alone, shaking with a potent cocktail of rage and fear. She leaned against the cool kitchen counter, her knees weak. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about her very identity. They weren't just planning financial theft. They were planning to erase me completely, to make her a non-person, a forgotten relic of a life she had dedicated to them. That afternoon, Eleanor drove her old, reliable sedan to Evelyn Cho's modest law firm. It was a small office tucked away on a quiet street, a world away from the gleaming corporate towers Victoria Sterling likely inhabited. As she walked through the door, Eleanor felt a wave of relief, a sense of safety she hadn't experienced in days. Evelyn, a woman with kind eyes and a sharp mind, greeted her warmly. Eleanor recounted the morning's events, her voice trembling slightly as she described Arthur's cruelty and the insidious nature of the power of attorney document. Evelyn listened intently, her expression growing increasingly grim. When Eleanor finished, Evelyn nodded slowly. "Eleanor," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "what they're asking you to sign isn't just an asset transfer. It's a blueprint for elder abuse. That power of attorney, combined with their claims of your forgetfulness, is a direct path to having you declared incompetent and institutionalized." Eleanor felt a wave of nausea, her worst fears confirmed. She closed her eyes, a silent prayer forming on her lips. "I know this is terrifying, Eleanor," Evelyn continued, reaching across the desk to squeeze her hand. "But we don't give up. We fight back. But first, we need to protect what's yours." Over the next few hours, Evelyn guided Eleanor through a series of crucial legal maneuvers. With meticulous care, Eleanor signed power of attorney revocations, effectively nullifying any prior or potential claims Arthur might have on her decision-making. They established asset protection trusts, carefully transferring certain accounts and properties into legal structures that would shield them from Arthur's grasp. And most importantly, Eleanor drafted a new will, meticulously detailing her wishes and ensuring that Arthur and Serena would not benefit from her passing in the way they so clearly intended. "The key to all of this," Evelyn stressed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "is to do this quietly. If they suspect you're taking legal action, they'll accelerate their timeline. They'll try to have you declared incompetent even faster. We need to be one step ahead." As Eleanor prepared to leave, Evelyn handed her a small, elegant pen. "This," Evelyn explained, her eyes serious, "is actually a recording device. If they try to pressure you again, if Arthur threatens you, or if Victoria Sterling attempts to strong-arm you tomorrow morning, we'll want evidence. Crucial, irrefutable evidence." Eleanor clutched the pen, its smooth metal cool against her palm. It felt heavier than it looked, weighted with the promise of justice. She knew what she had to do. Tuesday morning dawned crisp and cold, but Eleanor felt a fire within her. She awoke, not with dread, but with a quiet exhilaration. Her mind was sharp as a blade, every nerve tingling with anticipation. Today was the day. Today she would unveil her counterattack. She performed her morning routine with a practiced calm, as if it were any other day. She brewed Arthur's coffee, prepared his usual toast, and set it on the kitchen table. He was already seated, his face etched with impatience and a cold, determined resolve. "Good morning, Arthur," Eleanor said, her voice light. He grunted in response, not bothering to look up. "Morning. You're going to sign those papers right now. No more delays." His tone was firm, brooking no argument. Eleanor smiled softly, a genuine smile that hid a multitude of secrets. "Of course," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I understand now." She truly did. She understood his true nature, the depths of his betrayal, and Serena's long-term plan to systematically dismantle her life. Before heading into the dining room, Eleanor made a quick detour to the bathroom. Her hands, though trembling slightly, were steady as she activated Evelyn's recording device. The tiny red light glowed, a silent witness. She carefully placed the pen in the inner pocket of her cardigan, close to her heart. Feeling a profound sense of calm descend upon her, the serenity was not born of surrender, but of battle readiness. Moments later, the front doorbell chimed. Arthur opened it to reveal Victoria Sterling, Charlotte Reed, and, to Eleanor's unsurprise, Serena Thorne. Serena, dressed in a sleek, expensive outfit, swept into the house like she owned it, her eyes darting around as if assessing her new domain. "Eleanor, darling," Serena exclaimed, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that grated on Eleanor's ears. "I hope you slept well." The subtle reference to Eleanor's banishment to the garage was not lost on her. It was a veiled jab, a reminder of Eleanor's new diminished status. Eleanor simply offered a tight-lipped smile in return. At the dining table, the atmosphere was thick with a palpable tension, thinly veiled by professional decorum. Victoria Sterling laid out the documents once more, neatly fanned across the polished wood. She gestured to the power of attorney document. "Eleanor, if you'd be so kind, just your signature here. This will simply allow Arthur to take care of all the complicated financial and medical decisions, freeing you to focus on your well-being." Eleanor picked up the pen they offered, its expensive weight feeling foreign in her hand. She noticed their collective relaxation. Arthur leaned back, a smug expression on his face. Serena exchanged a triumphant glance with Victoria. They believed she was about to capitulate, to sign away her life without another word. But Eleanor wasn't finished. She lowered the pen, her gaze sweeping across their expectant faces. "Before I sign," she began, her voice still soft but with an edge they hadn't heard before, "I have a few questions. Just to be absolutely clear, what happens to my assets under this arrangement? My jewelry, the art collection, the shares in that small tech company I invested in years ago?" Victoria, momentarily taken aback, recovered quickly. She explained the trust, Daniel's role, the monthly allowance, all the things they had carefully orchestrated. "Everything is accounted for, Eleanor, for your benefit and for the family's future." "Well, and what about my other children?" Eleanor asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. Arthur visibly shifted in his seat. The question was a loaded one, as Eleanor had no other children. It was a test, a deliberate probe into their assumptions. Ignoring Arthur's discomfort, Eleanor pressed on, her voice losing a fraction of its gentle demeanor. She looked directly at the incapacitation clause in the power of attorney. "This clause," she said, tapping the document with the pen, "it's quite broad. What if someone convinced them I was incompetent when I wasn't?" Arthur's face flushed. "Eleanor, don't be paranoid," he snapped, his voice laced with exasperation. "No one is trying to convince anyone of anything. We just want to make sure you're taken care of." But Eleanor ignored him. Her gaze remained fixed on the document, and she began to read aloud, her voice clear and steady, the words echoing in the sudden silence of the dining room. "This power of attorney grants Arthur Vance full and unreserved authority to make any and all decisions regarding Eleanor Vance's financial affairs, personal care, medical treatments, including but not limited to psychiatric treatment and commitment to care facilities, should she be deemed incapacitated by 2 licensed medical professionals." She paused, letting the full weight of the words hang in the air. "So to clarify," Eleanor continued, looking from Arthur to Victoria, then to Serena, her eyes blazing with a newfound fire, "Arthur gets control of all my money, all my property, and the legal right to lock me away if I object. Is that a correct summary?" Arthur slammed his hand on the table, the unexpected noise rattling the teacups. "That's enough, Glenda. Sign the papers now," he roared, his facade completely shattered. Serena leaned across the table, her face contorted in a sneer, all traces of false sweetness gone. "You're just a bitter old woman with no friends, no money, and no options. Nobody cares what you think," she hissed, venom dripping from every word. Eleanor slowly pushed back her chair and stood. Her posture was straight, her gaze unwavering. "You think that, do you?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. She reached into her cardigan pocket, not for the pen, but for a manila envelope she had prepared earlier. "But I'm not stupid." With deliberate movements, she pulled out its contents, spreading them across the table, directly over the legal documents they had tried to force upon her. There were copies of recent bank statements, property deeds, documents that clearly showed her substantial independent wealth. And then the final devastating blow, a printed copy of a contract with a private psychiatric facility in Nevada dated 3 weeks ago, complete with Arthur's signature. And next to it, a pre-signed commitment order with her name on it. The dining room, once a stage for their elaborate deceit, was now frozen in a tableau of shock. Victoria Sterling's usually composed face was a mask of disbelief as her eyes darted between the bank statements, the property deeds, and the undeniable contract from the Nevada facility. Her scheme, so meticulously crafted, was laid bare, exposed for the insidious plot it truly was. Arthur, his face white with rage and fear, slammed his fist on the table again. "Where did you get these papers, Glenda? What is this? These are private." Eleanor looked at him, her gaze as cold and sharp as winter ice. "Our 43rd wedding anniversary, Arthur. Very romantic, wouldn't you say? Your gift to me was a pre-signed commitment order to a mental institution." Her voice held no tremor, no hint of the pain that had festered for months, only a chilling resolve. Serena, her face contorted, shrieked, "These are forgeries! She's making it all up!" Eleanor merely raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? I'm quite certain the police and adult protective services will be very interested in determining the authenticity of these documents. Wouldn't you agree, Victoria?" She watched with satisfaction as a flicker of panic crossed Victoria Sterling's face. The mention of official scrutiny, of consequences, clearly hit home. Then, with a flourish that felt immensely satisfying, Eleanor pulled out another thicker manila envelope from her other pocket. She began to spread its contents across the table, one by one. "And since we're sharing," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "I thought you might be interested in these. There were new property deeds, all in my name only. There were detailed printouts of bank account transfers, moving significant sums of money into accounts under her sole control, and most devastatingly for them, a new will. Its contents were clear, concise, and utterly damning, leaving everything to her other 3 children." The silent, shocked gasp from Arthur and Serena was music to Eleanor's ears. Daniel, her son, was conspicuously absent from the new will. "These were all filed yesterday afternoon," Eleanor announced, her voice ringing with authority, "with my attorney, Evelyn Cho, along with a few other things, like restraining orders." The room fell into an even deeper silence, punctuated only by Arthur's ragged breathing and Serena's choked gasp. The weight of Eleanor's revelations crushed the air out of their carefully constructed reality. They had underestimated her, severely. Eleanor then slowly pulled out her phone, holding it up, the screen clearly displaying the active recording app. She looked directly at Arthur, then at Serena, then at Victoria. "And just in case anyone thought of denying any of this later," she said, her voice like steel, "every single word of this entire conversation, from the moment Victoria Sterling walked through the door, has been recorded." Arthur slumped back in his chair, defeated. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a pathetic attempt at justification. "The debts, Glenda," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "The business problems. I needed to protect what we have." Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes piercing him. "No, Arthur, you needed to steal what I have. There's a difference, a very significant difference." She swept her gaze over the table, taking in the crumpled papers, the shocked faces. "Consider this my formal eviction notice." She pointed to Arthur, then to Serena. "You both have until Friday to move out. This house," she added, her voice imbued with quiet triumph, "was bought with my inheritance from my grandmother. It was never put in your name, Arthur, until yesterday. And now it's back in mine. Solely." She then turned her attention to Serena, who looked utterly bewildered. "And Serena, darling, Daniel's trust fund? It's currently frozen, pending an investigation of fraudulent access. I suggest you have a long chat with your husband about that." Finally, Eleanor looked at Victoria Sterling, her gaze unyielding. "And as for you, Miss Sterling," she said, a faint, chilling smile playing on her lips, "you might want to update your malpractice insurance. I have a feeling you're going to need it." With a final triumphant nod, Eleanor walked out of the dining room, leaving behind a cacophony of panicked whispers, frantic rustling of papers, and choked exclamations. She felt light, unburdened, confident in her ability to reclaim her life, piece by painful piece. 2 days later, on Thursday afternoon, a forlorn Arthur appeared at the front door. He looked utterly disheveled, his clothes rumpled, his hair unkempt, his eyes hollow. He looked like a man who had lost everything. He pleaded, his voice cracking, admitting his crippling business debts, his mistakes, his desperation. Eleanor opened the door just wide enough to see him, but refused to let him cross the threshold. "Where's Serena, Arthur?" she asked, observing his pathetic state. He averted his gaze. She's staying with her sister for a few days. Things are difficult." Eleanor nodded slowly, a wry smile playing on her lips. "You know, Arthur," she said, her voice calm, devoid of anger, only a profound sense of closure. "You already lost everything years ago. You just didn't realize it until now." And with that, she gently but firmly closed the door on him, ending a chapter of her life that had been long overdue for closure. A week after Arthur's tearful plea at her door, Eleanor received a call that sent a cold shiver down her spine, far more chilling than any of Arthur's threats. It was Evelyn Cho, her voice grave. "Eleanor," Evelyn began without preamble, "I have some information about Serena Thorne, and it's not good." Eleanor's heart quickened. "What is it, Evelyn?" "Her name isn't Serena Thorne," Evelyn revealed. "Her real name is Zara Matsumoto, and she has a history." Evelyn proceeded to lay out a stunning, horrifying narrative. Zara Matsumoto had been married twice before, both times to older, wealthy men. Both marriages had ended in death. The first husband, a prominent businessman from Chicago, had died in a mysterious car accident just over a year into their marriage, leaving Zara a substantial inheritance. The second, an elderly widower from Florida, had been committed to a psychiatric facility for incompetence 6 months after marrying Zara, only to die mysteriously from complications a few months later. Eleanor listened in stunned silence, a dawning horror creeping over her. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The pre-signed commitment papers, Arthur's casual talk of her forgetfulness, the swiftness of their plan to institutionalize her. "She was planning to kill me," Eleanor whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. The thought solidified into a terrifying certainty. Zara hadn't just wanted her money, she wanted her gone, permanently. Evelyn confirmed Eleanor's chilling deduction. "Her pattern, Eleanor, is remarkably consistent. She targets financially comfortable, often recently widowed or vulnerable men with dominant wives. She systematically eliminates the wife, usually by discrediting them and having them committed or otherwise removed. Then, once she has full control of the husband and his assets, the husband also has an accident." Eleanor felt a profound, stomach-lurching nausea. The magnitude of what she had narrowly escaped was unfathomable. She had been weeks, maybe even days, away from a fate far worse than financial ruin. She would have been dead within 6 months, just like the others. Her simple act of defiance had not just saved her money, it had saved her life. "We've already contacted the FBI," Evelyn stated, her voice grim. "This isn't just elder abuse, Eleanor. This is a potential murder investigation." The following day, 2 FBI agents, Ramirez and Miller, arrived at Eleanor's door. They were polite but serious, their presence adding a stark reality to Evelyn's revelations. They explained Zara's pattern, tracing her activities across multiple states over the past 8 years, leaving a trail of dead husbands and emptied estates. Eleanor's case, they emphasized, was the first where a target had fought back successfully, and her evidence, the documents, the recordings, her first-hand account, was absolutely crucial. "We believe she disappeared Tuesday night," Agent Ramirez informed Eleanor, referring to the night her plot was exposed. "There's no sister she could be staying with. That was a fabrication. She likely fled, or she's already seeking a new target." The thought sent a fresh wave of cold dread through Eleanor, knowing such a predator was still out there. "I'll do whatever you need," Eleanor stated, her resolve hardening. She spent hours giving a full statement, recounting every detail, every subtle manipulation, every chilling word, providing them with all the evidence she had meticulously gathered. Later that evening, as dusk settled, there was a tentative knock at her door. It was Daniel. He looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed, his clothes rumpled. But for the first time in a long time, Eleanor saw something in his gaze that might have been understanding, or perhaps genuine remorse. "Mom," he began, his voice hoarse, I came to apologize. I was so stupid. Serena, she told me things about you, that you were becoming paranoid, that you were losing your memory. She even fabricated evidence, little notes and things that she said you'd left around the house, saying you were confused. Tears welled in his eyes, tracking clean paths through the grime on his cheeks. I thought I was doing the right thing, Mom. I thought my own mother was trying to destroy our family. I thought I was protecting Dad, protecting us all. Eleanor studied him, searching for the truth in his words. The betrayal from her son had cut deeper than Arthur's, a wound she feared would never heal. But in his brokenness, in the raw honesty of his tears, she saw genuine remorse. He looked like a child lost, utterly devastated by his own blindness. I was so angry at you, Daniel confessed, his voice choked with emotion. When you started asking questions, when you delayed signing, she twisted it, Mom. She said you were being spiteful, trying to ruin us. But then, when I heard about the other women, about who she really was, I saw everything clearly. I realized how completely wrong I was. He looked up at her, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. I made a choice, Mom. I chose her. But I shouldn't have. Finally, I chose right. I chose my mother. Eleanor remained silent for a long moment, taking in his confession. The path to forgiveness would be long, arduous, and uncertain. But for the first time, she saw a glimmer of the sun she had raised, the sun she had almost lost. Eleanor and Daniel talked until the early hours of the morning, long after the last star had faded and the first hint of dawn brushed the sky. Daniel, humbled and broken, poured out his heart, explaining how Serena, or rather her eponym, had orchestrated a masterclass in psychological manipulation. She had systematically isolated him from his family, whispering insidious doubts about Eleanor, twisting every innocent act into a sign of paranoia or mental decline. He admitted with painful honesty how susceptible he had been, how eager to believe the worst in his mother, blinded by a desire to protect his father and his own perceived future. Eleanor listened, not with judgment, but with a deep, aching sadness. When he finished, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs, she pulled him into a tight embrace. Forgiveness will take time, Daniel, she murmured into his hair. For both of us. But love, my dear, love never stopped. It was a fragile bridge, but a bridge nonetheless, built on the rubble of their shared trauma. 3 months later, the aroma of roasted turkey and sage once again filled Eleanor's home. But this time, the scent was accompanied by a lightness, a joyous anticipation she hadn't felt in years. There was no longer Arthur's looming criticism, no Serena's passive-aggressive digs, no underlying current of malice. The house breathed, finally free. The divorce was finalized weeks ago. Arthur was left with his failing business, a small settlement, and the crushing weight of his choices. When Eleanor had last seen him, he looked 10 years older, broken not just by financial ruin, but by the horrific truth of Zara's identity and intentions. Eleanor felt no satisfaction, no pity, only a quiet acknowledgement that he had made his bed and now he lay in it. His fate was his own. Her other children, Sarah, Mark, and Paula, arrived, their faces radiating warmth and genuine affection. They had been shocked with the depth of Arthur's and Zara's betrayal, but not entirely surprised by the divorce. They knew their mother, knew her quiet strength. It's about time, Mom, Sarah had said on the phone, her voice thick with emotion. We're so incredibly proud of you for fighting back. As Sarah hugged her fiercely, she pulled back, her eyes twinkling. Mom, you look wonderful. You've lost weight, and that glow, you look years younger. Mark, ever the jester, clapped her on the back. Our warrior woman. Who knew you had it in you, Mom? Paula, the youngest, raised her glass of sparkling cider during dinner. To Eleanor, she toasted, her voice clear and strong, to your freedom, to your incredible courage, and to being the most badass 66-year-old I know. Cheers and laughter erupted around the table, gathered around the very same mahogany table where she had been so cruelly humiliated. Eleanor looked at her children, at her real family, and a wave of profound gratitude washed over her. The conversation flowed easily, filled with genuine affection, shared memories, and excited plans for the future. There was no mention of Arthur, no dwelling on Daniel's struggles. This was their space, their time, cleansed of the toxicity that had nearly consumed them. Later, as they were clearing dishes, Paula leaned in. Mom, are you really happy? Eleanor smiled, a deep, contented smile that reached her eyes. I'm happier than I've been in decades, my dear. Truly. A few days later, a formal letter arrived from the FBI. Eleanor opened it with a sense of quiet anticipation. It informed her that Zara Matsumoto, alias Serena Thorne, had been captured in Florida, attempting to marry a 70-year-old widower. The news brought a wave of relief, knowing she was finally off the streets, no longer a threat. She would be charged with multiple counts of fraud, elder abuse, and most significantly, the suspicious deaths of her previous husbands. The letter explicitly stated that Eleanor's evidence, her courage in fighting back, had been crucial in apprehending the serial predator. Tucked into the envelope was a small, handwritten note from Agent Ramirez. It was personal, heartfelt. Mrs. Vance, it read, your courage and determination in fighting back not only saved your own life, but undoubtedly saved countless others. Thank you. Eleanor held the note, tears blurring her vision. She had faced the darkest corners of human nature, had been betrayed by those she loved most, and had risen from the ashes a new woman. She was braver, wiser, and immeasurably stronger. Reclaiming her life wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about reclaiming her spirit, her voice, her worth. She had built a future entirely her own, a victory perfected by honesty, resilience, and the enduring power of true family love.